Rams at Seahawks. Seahawks 2.5-point favorites. 47.5 points is the over/under. These were the two best teams in terms of Aaron Schatz's DVOA over the regular season, and one of the two best matchups in a championship game in a while, according to him. And I think just like everyone can see it, right? Of course, the regular season, these were the two best teams in the NFL. By the end, it was kind of just like, hey, which one gets the one seed? That's probably the one with a clear path here. Both the two previous matchups felt incredibly evenly matched. Obviously, when you got bad Darnold, Seahawks lost. When you got better Darnold, Seahawks won. But I think the interesting thing is that Darnold, from week 10 on, has quietly been bad. Maybe not even quiet. Like, they keep winning games, but he is the 28th ranked quarterback per PFF over that span. And this Rams defense has obviously given him fits. How do we see it going?
This game feels like, remember, do you remember the WrestleMania 17 preview for The Rock versus Stone Cold, where it's like Linkin Park or Limp Bizkit My Way was like the little bumper music leading into it. It feels like that. It feels like these two teams have been on a collision course all season for this moment. And I think in this game, Sam Darnold's going to have to take the check down. You're going to have to play it safe in this game. I worry in this game that the Seahawks aren't going to be able to move the ball on the ground. So that sort of makes Sam Darnold go, oh, I got to try and get chunk plays. And if he's trying to get chunk plays, that's how you get 4 interceptions against the Rams the first time. That's how you get 2 interceptions the second time these two teams played. So I worry that Darnold isn't going to play composed and has to doesn't trust his eyes in this game, because what Chris Shula does really well is he plays the defense top down. He allows for his defense and his pass rush to really take over. And then from there, you let your secondary, you let your linebackers just come up and make tackles in space. All they got to do is just wrap up and tackle. And in this game, if they're not able to get the run game going, can the Seahawks be explosive without Sam Darnold feeling the need to throw the ball into double coverage?
Mm-hmm. I do think interesting notes from 2 previous matchups. So the 2 games against the Rams were his 2 highest in terms of dropbacks all season long. They are a run-heavy team. Last week, he had 19 dropbacks. The first game, 46 against the Rams. Second game, 42. And it was also, this tracks, but it was the 2 times he was pressured the most all season. 18 the second matchup, 14 the dropbacks the first matchup. So, that is, if there's a secret and what Sam Darnold struggled with over the course of his career, it's when it's all on him and when there's pressure coming, that's when he's struggled. It's when he has everything kind of good around him and he can just be, I don't want to say a complimentary piece, but when he can just be a point shoot, let's go attack down the field. That's when you got, very impressive Darnold performances over the early part of the season. So I tend to think there is something about this Rams defense, not something about it, it's good defense, but I tend to think that they just are his kryptonite to a degree. They just have the goods to take away what he really wants to do offensively.
And it's so confusing to me how the Rams are able to do it to the Seahawks, because the Seahawks are one of the most aggressive downfield passing units in the NFL. And the Rams don't necessarily have speed in that secondary. They give up a lot of explosive downfield targets. We've seen the Rams be attacked downfield by a lot of great receiving cores. But with the Seahawks, it just sort of feels like they're able to force this team to play in the mid-range and force them to eat their vegetables offensively. You got to try and take the 5 and 6 yard gains before you can go get the 16. So I wonder if this is if they're going to try and hone in to stop JSN, who is going to be the secondary receiving option? Is this going to be Cooper Kupp revenge game? Is it going to be AJ Barner in downfield? There's got to be a way for them to create explosives in the passing game without needing JSN to be the only person to create explosives.
Well, I think their best way to do that is honestly kind of what they've been doing, which has just been running the ball really, really well. Last 4 games, Kenneth Walker, 364 yards over that span, 6 yards per attempt. He has been rolling on the ground, and if you have that, that's what, again, stops Sam Darnold from dropping back 46 times, 42 times. The goal for this, Sam Darnold, 19 dropbacks, the same way he did last week, right? Like that's the goal, is that you never even have to go to that counter punch, that your offensive line is so efficient up front, and Kenny Walker obviously just dynamic behind it, that it's that the Rams will have to change their structure as the game goes on because they're getting gashed on the ground.
And this is for the Rams. This is why you go out and sign Poona Ford. This is why you go and make the Poona Ford deal in the offseason. Because last year you got run over by the Eagles, and that was how you ended your season. This is why Poona Ford matters so much in this game. If you're going to stop the run and force Sam Darnold to be a quarterback in this game, if you force him to make the complex decisions on 3rd and longs, this is why you go out and get that guy. So you can rotate in Kobe Turner, Braden Fisk. And I do think this game is going to have to be, I'm not going to say a takeover, but they need more from their pass rush in this game. They didn't really get a lot in the Bears game, and that's partially because Caleb Williams is so great at avoiding sacks. But they have to fluster Sam Darnold. They have to force him to feel pressure. It's not necessarily getting him on the ground, but force him to feel you in the pocket, because that's how the turnovers start to happen.
I want to take a quick sidebar, because bringing up Poona Ford reminded me of one aspect of this Rams team building that I love and want to shout out to Les Snead. And I think he was really sharp on this. And I think he's kind of identified a market inefficiency, and the inefficiency being short defensive linemen in general. You have Kobe Turner, who's 6'1", Poona Ford, who's 5'11". You have, why am I blanking on the outside linebacker? You just drafted Josiah Stewart, who's 6 foot. Byron Young is 6'2". Like, they have identified what I think is market inefficiency. That is, a lot of teams want size and length along their front four, right? A lot of teams, that's almost a prerequisite. But what they've done is know that if you watch Kobe Turner's tape at Wake Forest, it was elite tape. The reason he fell to where he did is because he was tiny for a defensive tackle, has short arms. Poona Ford, the reason he's not, despite being one of the best run defenders in the NFL last season, getting this monster deal after it, is because he's 5'11", right? It's because they've identified that those body types in modern defenses actually can be very effective. We talked about this on the Sunday show about how defenses aren't gap control defenses anymore, how that's kind of gone by the wayside for just creating havoc. And guess what these undersized guys can do? They can get into the backfield because they have natural leverage. Think about when Kyle was on a bunch, he would talk about how Geno Atkins was the hardest guy to block that he ever faced because there were no options. Kyle's 6'6", Geno's 6 foot. How do you get under a guy 6 inches shorter than you? You don't. And so that's kind of what the Rams have up front, is this just conglomerate of high-end athletes who are not prototypical in terms of their builds, but all it does is just make life knowing that you're going to face this Rams defensive line for an offensive lineman is probably the worst assignment in the NFL, just because it's going to be ugly from snap one.
And I think that's sort of that entire thing about defensive tackles is something I've talked about with my friends. I sort of think like maybe arm length at defensive tackle might be a little overrated, because
going forward, like, it's not as important, I think, as it once was.
Yeah, because if you're able to get off the ball quickly, it's about leverage and getting hands-on first. Now, in years previous, with gap control defenses, you had to have that arm length because you could buy yourself time if you're not quick off the ball. But with teams using more run stunts, with teams using more when it comes to lateral quickness, getting hands on first means getting off the ball quick and gaining that leverage. It's about, it's the old saying, like, low man wins. And it's sort of how the Rams have built this defensive line is low man wins, and then the edge rushers just crater everything off the edge. They create a vice in the pocket. So I think this game is going to come down to Sam Darnold being comfortable within that vice and still making plays.
Everything I just said obviously applies also to Byron Murphy for the Seattle Seahawks, who is exactly that mold. He is 6 foot tall, 300 pounds, but that guy is pretty much immovable. Like in terms of one-on-one, what are you going to do? The guy's underneath your leverage consistently. And so the Seahawks defensive line, which we haven't talked about that side at all, I think they'll do a pretty good job of stopping this Rams running game as well. So like it really is going to come down to, I think, Sam Darnold versus Matt Stafford at the end of the day. And if Stafford, if it's not freezing cold, which it's not going to be this weekend, they're missing, the ice storm ain't hitting the western half of the United States. I think the NFL is very thankful that those two games are being played in Denver and Seattle and not out east here. But I think Stafford against this Seattle secondary is kind of like the matchup that ends up deciding the game. Is the Rams passing offense, is it back to what it was?
Well, I think the biggest reason that the Rams have had at least a modicum of success against the Seahawks defense is that they're able to punish the Seahawks for defending the run out of nickel. And the biggest reason why, and the biggest reason that the game flipped when it did in the second time these two teams played, is because Kevin Dotson went out with an injury. And Kevin Dotson, again, I'm going to keep harping on, Kevin Dotson is one of the most important players on this Rams offense. He doesn't get talked about a lot because he's a right guard, but he's one of the most important players on that offense because he brings physicality. With the Rams changing their offense from a more wide zone finesse run style to being more at you with duo and power and counter and misdirection, Kevin Dotson's ability to move guys at the line of scrimmage helps that offense so much. And you could tell and you could feel it in the game. Once Kevin Dotson went out, there was no more like, you can't grind out those 4 to 5 yard runs that keep up. Like that's sort of how the Rams win on offense. Is they're the most successful rushing offense in the NFL. They are willing to trade explosive runs for 5 yard runs because their passing game is so explosive. So with Kevin Dotson in the game, I feel like they're able to have a little bit more success running the football. And that's going to open up a lot more in the passing game, because I feel like this should be a game where if the Rams can force the Seahawks to play out of base because of how well they can run the football, maybe they got a shot. Because if they can't do it, then I'm a little more worried. But the fact they have Kevin Dotson back is huge for Los Angeles.
Sounds like you're leaning Rams here, JP. Do we think the Rams win this one?
I'm kind of leaning Rams. And even though it is in Seattle, it's going to be loud. I just feel like if it came down to who I trusted more in this game, I feel like I trust Sean McVay as a play caller, Matthew Stafford as a quarterback, despite playing the Seahawks defense, versus Sam Darnold, Clint Kubiak, and the Seahawks offense in what is Sam Darnold's first conference championship game. Clint Kubiak's first conference championship game as a play caller. Like there's so many firsts for the Seahawks offense that it feels like in high leverage situations, I'm going to lean with the guy that's been there before.
And like last week with the kick return right out the gate, it's like the pressure on Sam Darnold went from just like deflate. Like he did not over the course of that game. There was no sort of, you have to admit, last year he kind of crapped out in the biggest moments. You have to say like that's been a thing for Sam Darnold. There was no big moment last week. There's probably going to be some big moments this week. So I'm with you. And also I'm not going against O's the mentalist, right? I mean, he predicted 23-14 Rams over Broncos before the season. The fact that it's still possible is kind of nuts. And so I'm not going to go against it. That guy is working with some voodoo magic here, and I'm not going to question him.